Chapter 3. Troubles Brewing. Carrie sat sullenly at the breakfast table the next morning. We exchanged few words, but most of the time he looked at me. I thought I could see the accusations in his eyes. I didn't believe he had any right to make me feel guilty, and I refused to act ashamed. If anyone should be ashamed, he should, I thought, following me around at night, peeping through holes in the ceiling. Mommy was eager to hear about the dance, and I was thankful that at least she cared to want to share my happiness. As I spoke, I signed to May, describing the decorations, the food, the music, of course. I left out the unpleasantness over the ticket and mentioned nothing about Carrie pulling Robert's car out of the sand. "I thought you went to the dance too, Carrie," Daddy said when there was a pause. "Hardly," Carrie said disdainfully. "Then where were you, boy? It was pretty late when I heard you come up and hurry up those stairs." "I just met some friends at the beanbag," he said quickly. "How can you hang around a custard stand all night?" Daddy continued. Carrie shot a glance at me to see if I would say anything, and I looked down at my plate. "We were just hanging out," Carrie said. "I didn't realize how late it got." Daddy shook his head. "I don't know what you all have to talk about so much that you lose track of time." "You can pass a lot of time jawing, Jacob," Mommy said. "Like when you used to get together with Pat O'Reilly." "That's different. We talk about business," Daddy retorted, reddening at the criticism. It was enough to end the topic, for which Carrie and I were grateful. While we waited to go to brunch at Grandma Olivia's, I took May out to the beach and made some drawings while she sat beside me, asking me questions about my date and about Robert. Drawing was nothing I did to help relax. Drawing was something I did to help relax, just like needlework. I drew pictures of all of us, some from memory, some from things I saw at the moment. Everyone who saw my drawings thought they were very good. I once showed them to Kenneth Childs, who said I might consider taking art classes and develop my talent. I never thought I was good enough to do that. And wasting time trying to be someone I couldn't be was something Daddy was convinced sinful. God grants us enough time to do something worthy with ourselves. Procrastination, chasing foolish dreams, that's what the devil would like us to do, he said. I wasn't fixed on anything yet, but I had been thinking lately that I might become a teacher. Maybe even a teacher in a school for the handicapped. It made me feel special and filled me with so much pleasure when I was able to teach May something and see her eyes brighten with understanding. I felt as I had broken through a thick wall. No matter how small the achievement, I thought I could do this successfully with other handicapped children. While we were sitting on the beach, drawing and talking, Daddy and Carrie went by on their way to the dock. "We're just going to check on the lobster traps," Daddy explained. Carrie stood up, silent, still somewhat sullen. "We won't be long, Laura. You should get yourself and May ready soon." We always dressed up for lunch at Grandma Olivia's. In fact, we never went there without treating the visit as if it was a special occasion. This was easy for Grandma Olivia, since she was always formally dressed. Even when she was working in her garden, she had her hair pinned properly and wore outfits that most would save for trips into town or visiting with company. Grandpa Samuel usually wore a sports jacket and slacks, along with a tie. Their home was kept immaculate, everything in its proper place. As children, we were forbidden to wander in the rooms and were terrified of touching anything. "Okay, Daddy," I said, and folded my drawing pad. I signed to May, and she folded hers as well. As we headed for the house, I thought this would be the best and maybe the only time I would get to call Robert. I was sure he was on pins and needles, worrying about what might have happened after I entered the house last night. Robert's mother answered. "Oh, hello," she said with enthusiasm after I introduced myself. "From the way Robert's been acting this morning, I'd say you two had a wonderful time last night. I have to say everything to him twice," she added with a little laugh. I heard Robert complaining in the background. "I better give him the phone before he throws a fit." "Hi," he said. "My mother's in one of her hilarious moods today." "I can't wait to meet her," I said. "I'll introduce you. As long as you know she'll say anything," he added in a voice meant for hers. He paused and then in a lower voice asked how things were. "Everything's fine," I said. "My father was waiting up and I could tell he was relieved when I made it home before curfew. And Carrie didn't say anything," I added, knowing he was wanting to hear that most of all. "Your father was waiting up? I guess it would have been disastrous if Carrie hadn't came to the rescue. But I still can't get over his following us, Laura. Have you talked to him about it?" "Not yet, Robert. I'm waiting for the right time." "Don't put it off, Laura," he warned. "I won't," I said in a little voice. It wasn't something I looked forward to doing. "I can't wait to see you again," he added in a softer tone. "Me neither. I'm going to my grandmother's for brunch in a little while. I've got to get ready and help May get dressed." "Okay, thanks for the call," he said in a voice that sent shivers all the way to my toes. "I couldn't wait," I confessed shyly. "I'm glad," he said, and we both hung up. I hurried upstairs to dress and help May pick out something that wouldn't make Grandma Olivia shake her head disapprovingly. Grandma Olivia was always uncomfortable around May. We all knew that signing unnerved her. She said all those hand-bending, turning through the air, finger-jabbing, made her stomach jump. She resisted learning any of it, and consequently spoke to her youngest grandchild only through an interpreter, usually me or Carrie. Although Mommy seemed to look forward to Grandma Olivia's brunches and dinners, she was always nervous the day of the visit. Mommy reminded me of someone who was preparing for an audition. Pains were taken over how all of us were dressed, how well our hair was brushed and our shoes were shined, and we always, even now, reminded about rules of behavior at Grandma Olivia's house, including what not to say and what to say. If one of us didn't pass Grandma Olivia's inspections, Daddy usually blamed Mommy, so we did our best to live up to the expectations. We all ended up looking like different people when we were dressed up, especially May and I, since Grandma Olivia didn't like women to wear their hair loose and down. She said it made them look like witches. So I had to use bobby pins and combs to wrap my hair neatly, and even May wore a little French twist, although the old-fashioned hairdos added years to our age. We didn't look overly grown up since makeup was strictly forbidden, even for Mommy. She didn't even wear lipstick. Despite all this, I did look forward to going. Grandma Olivia usually had wonderful things to eat. I especially loved the tiny cakes with frosting and jelly in the center. And even now, even though we're really grown up, Grandpa Samuel always gave me and Carrie, along with May, a crisp $5 bill when we left. I had one particular dress that always seemed the most acceptable to Grandma Olivia. It was a navy blue dress with a white collar that buttoned up at the base of my throat. Although I had other equally dowdy dresses, for some reason this one always brought a smile to Grandma Olivia's grim face. When I stood before the mirror, I reminded myself to keep my shoulders back and my head up, even if I was balancing a book on top. One of Grandma Olivia's pet peeves was the way young people slouched. She claimed posture showed character and embellished good health. I never told anyone except Carrie, but I actually felt sorry for Grandma Olivia. Sure, she had a big, beautiful house filled with extravagant furniture, paintings, and decorations. Her dinners were elaborate, served on expensive china with fine crystal glasses and real silverware. Yet, for all her extravagance, her important acquaintance, and her gala affairs, Grandma Olivia never looked happy to me. If anything, I thought she was trapped by her wealth and position. How sad it must be, I concluded, to go through your life never letting your hair down, never walking barefoot on the beach, never being lazy and having a potluck dinner. In short, never doing anything spontaneously, but always first to go through the proper arrangements, as your whole life had been according to Emily Post. I knew very little about grandmother's past. She never volunteered information and rarely, if ever, told stories unless, of course, they were to illustrate and support some rule of behavior. Whenever I asked Mommy questions about Grandma Olivia, Mommy would shake her head and say, "Your grandmother had a difficult childhood because of the problems caused by her sister Belinda." What those problems were and how they made Grandma Olivia's life difficult was left a mystery. Belinda had problems with alcohol when she was younger and eventually ended up in a rest home nearby. Whenever I visited her, she told me stories that made references to her and Grandma Olivia's youth. Her stories were almost impossible to understand because Aunt Belinda confused the past with the present, mixing up people and places. Sometimes when she saw me, she called me Sarah, thinking I was my mother. And once recently, she called me Haley. I know Grandma Olivia didn't approve of my visiting Aunt Belinda. She treated her sister as if she was poisonous. I rarely brought up her name in front of Grandma Olivia because I knew the sort of reaction I would receive. With all these no's and strict rules to follow, Carrie, May, and I practically tiptoed around the big house, keeping our voices low and keeping ourselves out of sight and out of mind as possible. After we were dressed, Daddy looked us over. He straightened Carrie's tie and brushed down May's skirt after he spotted a tiny crease. "I can have her take it off and iron it, Jacob," Mommy offered. "It's all right," he said. "We'll be late. Let's get started." The three of us got into the back seat, Carrie sitting on one end and me on the other with May in between us. He gazed out the window and didn't look at me once during the ride to Grandma Olivia's and Grandpa Samuel's. "What a pretty spring day," Mommy said as we headed down the Route 6. Grandma Olivia's house was midway between Providencetown and North Truro. From the outside, my grandparents' house looked far from cold and impersonal. It was a large 2-story, clapboard-covered home with wide-planked, whitewashed front door. Over the door was a fan-shaped window of colored glass, though I'm sure it was meant to be decorative. Carrie and I always joked about it, looking like a big gloomy frown, warning visitors to stay away. Grandma Olivia was very proud of her home, claiming it was prestigious because of its historical past. The original portion of this house was built around 1780, she declared to every new visitor. The grounds around the home were also beautiful and well taken care of. The carpet-like green lawn was always immaculate, and the flower garden was dazzling. There were pansies, roses, and geraniums. There were even small duck ponds and a dozen or so ducks in it. In the front of the house were 2 large blooming red maple trees. Between them on the far right was a bench swing with a canopy over it, although I don't think anyone used it but Carrie, May, or I. We saw Judge Child's car parked in the circular driveway when we pulled in. Judge Childs was a frequent guest, especially for Sunday brunch. He was my grandparents' closest friend. The judge was retired, but Grandma Olivia always stressed the fact that he still had friends in high places and was influential. After we got out of the car, Mommy gave us another quick glance over, straightening May's clothes again, trying to brush out any creases. Daddy rang the doorbell, and Grandma Olivia's housekeeper, Loretta, answered the door. Loretta had worked for Grandma Olivia and Grandpa Samuel, but she never looked terribly happy about it. "Everyone's in the sitting room," she declared without much emotion, and stepped back to allow us in. We entered like one of the duck families from the pond. Daddy first, Mommy right behind, and then the three of us trailing in single file. There was a short marble-floored entryway with paintings on both sides, seascapes of the Cape and boats and portraits of sailors. The house was always full of perfumed aroma of flowers, even in the winter time. The sitting room was the first room on the right. Carrie and I used to pretend that we would go ice skating over it because there was a large rug between the pair of beige sofas under the large dark maple coffee table. On every table, on every shelf, there was expensive-looking crystal pieces, vases, and occasionally pictures in silver and gold frames of Grandpa Samuel and Grandma Olivia when they were younger. Some of the pictures of Daddy and Mommy as well, and a group picture of me, Carrie, and May were taken 4 years ago. There were no pictures of Uncle Chester and Aunt Haley. Bringing up their names in this house was like uttering profanity. Everything always looked brand new to me. Every piece of metal glittered, and every piece of glass. The windows were clean. You couldn't tell if they were opened or closed unless you were right up to them. Grandma Olivia was sitting in her chair looking like a queen granting an audience when we entered the sitting room. She wore an elegant rose silk dress with a large cameo above her left breast. A piece we knew was a heirloom handed down from her grandmother on her father's side. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun with a pearl comb decorated with small diamonds. Grandpa Samuel sat casually compared to Grandma Olivia. He wore a light brown suit that looked dapper. His face broke into a wide and warm smile when he saw us. "Here they are," he declared. "And a pretty handsome and beautiful group of grandchildren, too. Hey, Nelson." Judge Childs nodded. He sat across from Grandpa Samuel on Grandma Olivia's right side. The judge was a distinguished-looking elderly man with gray hair shot through and some of his original light brown hair color. It was neatly trimmed. Despite his age, I thought he still was handsome. His face was full and his complexion robust, with wrinkles only across his forehead. He had light brown eyes that dazzled with the glow and characteristic of a man half his age. "Absolutely, Samuel. You and Olivia are very lucky people." "Hello," the judge said. Mommy nodded and smiled. "We've got Bloody Marys if you like," Grandpa said. "No, thank you," Daddy said quickly. "I know you like Bloody Marys, Sarah," Grandma followed with a twinkle in his eyes. Mommy glanced quickly at Daddy, who was as close to scowl as could be. "Oh, I don't think so, just yet, Pa," she replied. "When are you going to loosen up that collar you have around your wife's neck, Jacob?" Grandpa said, and the judge smiled. "That's an inappropriate remark," Grandma Olivia declared, "especially in front of the children," she added firmly. "Loretta," she snapped, "please take the children into the kitchen and give them some lemonade while we wait for brunch to be served." "Yes, ma'am," Loretta said. Grandma Olivia thought it was inappropriate for young people to sit and listen to older people converse. While we were standing in the doorway beside and behind Mommy and Daddy. She had been looking over at us. She nodded at Daddy. "The children look very nice," she offered Mommy, who beamed immediately. "Now don't go wandering outside and getting messed up," she called after us. "We'll call you in the dining room in a little while." "Sit down, Jacob. You're making me nervous standing there like that. Sarah?" They moved quickly, and Loretta led us away. She gave us the lemonade, and then we, as we had done many times before, went out back to the gazebo. Carrie stood staring out toward the ocean while I entertained May. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes narrowed as if he were in pain. "You go down a dirt road like that on your first date with a guy? It doesn't look nice. It makes you look like an easy target," he said. "I just knew he was going to do that. I just knew it," he claimed, and turned back toward the sea. "First, I'm not an easy target, Carrie Logan. I don't do what I don't want to do, and we didn't do anything wrong, for your information. Robert is a complete gentleman." "Huh," he said. "You don't know him, Carrie." "You'll see," Carrie predicted. "Tomorrow they'll be chattering about you in the locker room, and Royce will be bragging about it and how easy you were." "He will not. And it's dreadful for you to say that he would. You're just jealous," I accused. His shoulders stiffened and he turned, his face turning pink. "What's that supposed to mean? You don't have a girlfriend and you don't go out on dates, so..." "So what? So you're jealous that I do." "Dates," he said, curling up the right corner of his mouth. "Some dates." I realized that May had been reading my lips and watching my face. She looked confused. I tried smiling at her, but she turned and looked at Carrie, her eyebrows raising, and then she gazed at me again. She didn't see us argue often. "We'll talk about it later," I said. "There's nothing to talk about," Carrie resorted. "Why did you follow us?" "Why?" He shook his head. "I went to the dance to see what it was like, and then when I saw you two leave early, I just knew I had better keep my eye on you. Lucky for you, I did. I can't believe that you have the nerve to question me. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have made it home in time for curfew." "You've got to let me go." "Let you what, Laura? Go on, what?" "Grow up," I said. He started blinking rapidly and then turned to the ocean again. "I appreciate your concern, but I need my space too, Carrie." "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. He spun around and glanced at the house, his anger spilling over like water boiling out of a pot. "I don't know why we have to wait around for them to stop gossiping. I'm hungry. We hardly had anything for breakfast this morning." "So go tell Grandma," I challenged. He pounded up the steps to the door, nearly ripping off the hinges when he pulled it open. May tugged on my hand and started to sign her questions. "Carrie's hungry," I explained. "He wants to see how much longer before we eat." She stared after him and then glanced at me, her suspicious eyes small and troubled. I lowered my shoulders in defeat. Why did my most wonderful new relationship have to bring sadness? Why couldn't Carrie be happy for me? I was near tears when I had to turn away from May because she saw my sadness. Whatever Carrie did inside sped things along, because a few moments later, Loretta appeared to say it was time to come in to eat. It was wonderful brunch as ever, with chunks of lobster and Alfredo sauce, shrimp cocktail, delicious home fries, and salads filled with almost every vegetable imaginable. And as usual, the great desserts, including my favorite, the multi-layered, multicolored petite fours. Afterward, the men went for their walk on the beach, Judge Childs and Grandpa lighting up their cigars. They took Carrie along with Daddy and Mommy. and Mommy, May, and I were left behind with Grandma Olivia. Mommy started to tell Grandma about the date and how pretty I looked, when Grandma suddenly rose from her chair. "I'd like to speak with Laura," she said, interrupting Mommy's at mid-sentence. "If you don't mind, Sarah." "What? Oh no, why should I mind?" Mommy stuttered and gazed about the big room helplessly. Grandma Olivia was already at the door of the sitting room. "Come along, Laura," she commanded. I looked at Mommy, who only shook her head, her eyes wide with surprise. I caught up with Grandma in the hallway, heading toward the back door. "Why can't Mommy hear what we say, Grandma?" I asked nervously. "We'll go to the gazebo," she replied, ignoring my question. "It was a terrific brunch, Grandma. The coleslaw was rather bitter this time," she complained. We left the house and walked down the pathway to the gazebo and sat on the bench. "Mommy and May should come out too," I said. "It's so beautiful. There's hardly a cloud in the sky." I gazed down at the beach and saw the 4 men walking, little puffs of smoke from Grandpa and Judge Child's mouth. Carrie was a few steps behind the adults, his head down. "We'll send for them in a moment," Grandma Olivia said. "Now that you're obviously becoming a young woman with a woman's interests, I thought it was time that we had a little talk. Laura, I don't mean to interfere, but I don't think your mother is prepared for this sort of discussion," she added. "What kind of discussion is that, Grandma?" "A woman-to-woman discussion," she replied. "She's not as aware as the dangers." Dangers? I stopped smiling and sat back. I suddenly felt as if my wonderful brunch had tightened into a small, hard ball at the base of my stomach. "I don't understand, Grandma. What dangers?" "You're interested in someone, I understand, and you've actually gone out on a formal date with this person," she began, her eyes small and fixed on me. "Oh," I said with some relief. "Yes, he's a very nice young man. His name—" "I know his name," she said quickly. "I know his family and what they do. And I know he's been to your home for lunch, and you went to the school dance with him last night." My eyes widened with surprise. I smiled at Grandma's Olivia's interest in my social life. She had never asked questions about it before, or cared whether I had gone to a school dance or not. "I'm sorry, I haven't had the chance to tell you about him, Grandma," I told her. Finally, she and I would have a nice grandmother-granddaughter talk, I thought, and imagined she wanted to tell me about her own childhood romances. There isn't much that goes on in this town that I don't know, and there's nothing that involves my family and the family's name that I won't eventually find out about, she declared. "I may not discuss it with you, but I know how well you're doing in school and how much your teachers like you. I know how you're a great help and you're an obedient daughter. That's why I think it's so important for you to have this conversation," she continued. I widened my smile and nodded. "You're much too young to get deeply involved with one young man, especially one who comes from a family of questionable character." "What?" The little bubble of delight that started to fill me up suddenly popped. "Don't interrupt, Laura. Just listen and learn. The Logans in my family, the Gordons, go back to the Pilgrims, as you know. We have a strong, highly respected lineage. We're looked upon in this community. We're people of worth, status, and it brings with it much responsibility. We have to remain models of behavior and models of respectability. My father taught me years and years ago that the first most important, valuable thing is your own reputation. You and Carrie have been born with a gift that is your family name. It'll open doors for you and gain you respect. and place you on a high ladder of status, but you have a big responsibility, Laura, and that's to uphold the respectability and value of your family name. Because of that, she continued, there's a magnifying glass over you and your actions. She flashed a cold smile. Up until now, you've done nothing to slightly tarnish the family name, and I'd like to keep it that way. I intended to discuss it with your father before the day is over as well. She sat back, obviously waiting for my reaction. For a moment, I thought the words would get caught in my throat and my voice wouldn't work. I don't know what you've been told, Grandma, but it's not all a mistake. Robert Royce is a very nice young man, Grandma. He comes from a family of innkeepers, she said, practically spitting out the words as if they were bitter in her mouth. Do you know what an innkeeper is, Laura? How they started to be? They're people who had nothing, no family name, no reputation, practically destitute. They open their own home to strangers, clean up after them, wash their toilets and sinks, and serve food. They cater to their wishes, and worst of all, they contribute and are responsible for the pollution and destruction of the Cape. Fine homes, beautiful landscapes are all being marred by these motel and hotel chains. Anyone who can afford the price of a cheap bed can come here and enjoy what we, who built this, who founded it and created and made it elegant. You have no business consorting with someone like that, Laura. I absolutely forbid you to continue seeing this person. He'll only bring you down. Please, Grandma, I said, choking back my tears, don't talk like that. She tightened her lips. You must get a hold of yourself, Laura. You must become mature and strong and beat down any foolish little lusts and remember who you are. Unfortunately, she said with a deep sigh, we're already at a terrible time maintaining our family honor because of my sister and your Uncle Chester, but that has been remedied. We don't need something else to disgrace us and weaken the family's reputation. Remedied? Your son has left the family, and we're not permitted to mention his name in your presence. I don't understand all of it, Grandma. You never talk about him, but don't you ever miss him? He made a choice, and one that is unfortunately best for everyone, she said sternly. I'm not here to discuss the dead. I'm here to discuss you, the living. The dead? Laura said firmly. Do you understand what I've been trying to tell you? No, Grandma, I don't. I just met Robert. I like him. He's been nice to me. I didn't agree to marry him yet, I said. Her eyebrows rose so fast and so high, I thought they might leave her face. You'll never marry such a person, she stated. I don't judge people by their bank accounts, Grandma, I said. I meant it as a matter of fact, but she pulled her head back as if I reached across the gazebo and slapped her. I don't either, Laura. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point you're missing. Many of these so-called novo riches and resort business people, they have money, but they don't have class or reputation. They never will, no matter how fat their bank accounts become. But didn't you ever like anyone who wasn't from an old, respectable family, Grandma? Not even when you were growing up? Of course not, she said. I wouldn't permit myself to like someone like that. That's not something you can permit yourself to do or not do, Grandma, I said, smiling. It's something magical. Surely when you were my age, I never had a foolish young woman, Laura. Never like any of these empty-headed girls nowadays. My father wouldn't have tolerated it anyway, especially with my sister being such a disgrace. It would have destroyed him and both of his daughters. She paused to pull herself up tight again. We're not here to discuss my past. We're here to discuss your future and the future of the family's reputation, she insisted. Can't you remember what it was like at my age? You couldn't have worried about all this back then. Of course I worried about all this, she shook her head. I knew I should have taken more of a role in your upbringing. Sarah's just not equipped, and she has too much to do with your crippled sister. May is not crippled, Grandma. She has a handicap, but that hasn't stopped her from being a good student and doing most of the things other young girls can do. She's very helpful around the house. She does her chores, looking after her own things. She's far from a burden to Mommy, Grandma. If you would just let me teach you some sign language, you could talk with her directly and see for yourself how bright she is. Ridiculous. I have no time for that sort of thing. Besides, you all shield her too much because of this imperfection. She should be made to expect no favors, and certainly shouldn't be babied. Only then she'll have enough strength to stand up to her deformity. It's not a deformity, I insisted, and May is smart and strong enough to live a good life with her handicap. I didn't bring you out here to waste time on this topic, Laura. I brought you out here to give you the benefit of my years of wisdom and my sense of family responsibility. Unfortunately, I'm the one who has all of the strength in this family. Your grandfather's becoming more and more forgetful. I'm afraid he's falling into a dotage that will end up in a rest home sooner rather than later. Grandpa, he looks wonderful. You don't live with him, she said dryly. Anyway, I hope you've heard of some of what I said and will behave properly, doing the right thing. I like Robert Royce, Grandma. I'm not going to hurt him by telling him he's not good enough for the Logans, I said softly but firmly. She stared at me a moment, then slowly shook her head. I expected more from you, Laura. You leave me no choice but to speak to your father about this. I felt the tears come to my eyes. Daddy likes Robert too, I said. But I knew how strong my grandmother's influence was on my father. Usually her words were like gospel. Please don't say anything bad about him. If I have your word, you won't do anything hastily or foolish with this person, she said. Too many young people today think of nothing embarrassing of their families. Of course I won't. Very well, we'll see how things progress. Someday you'll be grateful for what I've told you today, Laura. You'll look back and laugh at yourself for being so foolish. She looked confident of that, but inside I thought, no, Grandma, I'll never be grateful for you telling me the magic between people is empty-headed foolishness. I'll never be grateful for your telling me that people have to be judged by their family lineage instead of the context of their character. That status is more important than anything, even honest feelings. No, Grandma, I won't be grateful. I'll always be full of pity, and not for myself, but for you. I said nothing of this, of course. Instead, I sat silently, watching her look toward the bench where the men were making their way back to the house. It looks like the great minds have settled the problems of the world and are returning, she said dryly. Why don't you ask your mother and sister to come out now? I rose quickly. When I was your age, I always thanked my elders for taking the effort and time to talk to me and share with me their wisdom, Laura, she said as I started away. I paused and turned back slowly. I know you want only happiness for me, Grandma. I thank you for that, I said. It didn't please her enough. She gave me the most chilling and piercing look I could remember. a look that sent me hurrying the house to get Mommy.